She was the most powerful tech executive in Silicon Valley until one ordinary Tuesday morning when armed men stormed into a quiet diner and held her at gunpoint. But the man who saved her life wasn't a bodyguard or a federal agent. He was a single father working the breakfast shift, an ex-Navy veteran with calloused hands and a secret ability he'd sworn never to use again. What started as a split-second decision in a crowded restaurant would spiral into an offer that would change 3 lives forever: hers, his, and his young daughters, if you believe that ordinary people can become extraordinary heroes, and that sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most powerful transformations, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories like this one that remind us what courage, sacrifice, and second chances really look like. And now, let's begin. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning shift at Rosie's Diner on Maple Street had a rhythm to it, a familiar cadence of sizzling bacon, clinking coffee cups, and the low murmur of regular customers who knew each other by first name. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where the jukebox still played vinyl records, and where the smell of fresh-baked biscuits could make you forget, at least for a moment, that the world outside was spinning too fast. Nicholas Clark moved through that rhythm like he'd been born into it. Apron tied around his waist, order pad tucked into his pocket, he balanced plates with the same precision he'd once used to navigate the deck of a naval destroyer. His dark hair was shorter now than it had been in his service days, touched with gray at the temples. His hands, rough and scarred, told stories he never spoke aloud. He'd been working at Rosie's for 8 months. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what he'd imagined when he'd enlisted at 18 with dreams of honor and adventure. But it was honest work, and more importantly, it gave him the flexibility he needed. Flexibility to be there when his daughter woke up with nightmares. Flexibility to make her doctor's appointments. Flexibility to be the only parent she had left. The diner was unusually crowded that Tuesday morning. A convention had rolled into town, filling the booths with out-of-towners and business casual, their laptops open, their phones constantly buzzing. Nicholas weaved between tables, refilling coffee, delivering orders of scrambled eggs and wheat toast, offering his quiet smile to anyone who made eye contact. That's when she walked in. Freeman didn't look like she belonged in Rosie's Diner. Everything about her screamed high-powered executive. Tailored charcoal blazer, the designer handbag. The way she moved with purpose, even when she was just looking for a seat. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and her eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the room like she was calculating variables. She chose a booth near the back, away from the clusters of convention attendees. Nicholas grabbed a menu and a pot of coffee, making his way over. "Morning," he said simply, setting down a clean mug. "Coffee?" She looked up, and for just a moment, their eyes met. Hers were green, the color of sea glass, and carried the weight of someone who'd been awake far too long. "Please," she said, her voice smooth but edged with exhaustion. "Black, strong." Nicholas poured, steady and practiced. "You want a minute with the menu, or do you already know what you need?" The corner of her mouth lifted slightly. "I need about 12 hours of sleep and a vacation. But I'll settle for the breakfast special. Eggs? Scrambled. Dry toast. No butter." Nicholas nodded, jotting it down. As he turned to leave, he felt it, that familiar pulse in the back of his mind. Not a sound, not a thought, but a sensation. Something off. His instincts, honed by years at sea and sharpened by experience he couldn't fully explain, told him to pay attention. He glanced toward the entrance. 3 men had just walked in. They moved wrong. Too deliberate. Too synchronized. One scanned the room like he was counting exits. Another kept his hand inside his jacket. The third locked eyes on Autumn Freeman, Nicholas's pulse didn't quicken. It steadied. His breathing slowed. Everything around him seemed to sharpen into focus, the hum of the air conditioner, the scrape of a fork on a plate, the shuffle of boots on linoleum. He moved back toward the kitchen, but kept his eyes on the men. They didn't sit. They didn't order. They just stood there, waiting. Then the one in the center pulled a gun. "Nobody move." His voice cut through the diner like a blade. Conversation stopped. Forks clattered. A woman near the window gasped. The second man moved quickly to the door, flipping the sign to closed and locking it. The third walked straight toward Autumn Freeman's booth, his hand reaching into his jacket. Autumn's face went pale, but she didn't scream. She sat frozen, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "Miss Freeman," the man said coldly, "you're coming with us." Nicholas didn't think. He didn't plan. He simply acted. He was halfway across the diner before anyone realized he was moving. The man near the door turned, raising his weapon, but Nicholas was already inside his range. One swift motion, Nicholas grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it sharply, and the gun clattered to the floor. A follow-up elbow to the jaw, and the man crumpled. The second gunman spun toward him, but Nicholas was already moving again. He ducked low, swept the man's legs out from under him, and drove his knee into the man's chest as he fell. The air left his lungs in a wheeze. And he didn't get back up. The third man, the one at Autumn's booth, pulled his weapon and aimed it directly at Nicholas. "Stop right there." Nicholas felt the familiar hum in his chest, the bioelectric pulse that connected him to the rhythm of life around him. He could sense the man's heartbeat, erratic and fast. He could feel the tension in his trigger finger, the slight tremor of adrenaline. Nicholas took one step forward, calm and unhurried. "You don't want to do this," he said quietly. The man's hand shook. "I said stop." Nicholas didn't stop. He moved like water, fluid and inevitable. Before the man could react, Nicholas closed the distance, twisted the gun from his grip, and delivered a sharp strike to the side of his neck. The man collapsed without a sound. Silence filled the diner. Every customer sat frozen, eyes wide, breathing shallow. Nicholas stood in the center of the room, 3 unconscious men at his feet, his apron still tied around his waist. He glanced around, making sure no one else was in danger, then calmly walked to the phone behind the counter and dialed 911. "Yeah, this is Rosie's Diner on Maple Street. We've had an attempted kidnapping. 3 suspects down. Send police and an ambulance. No one's hurt." He hung up and turned back to Autumn Freeman, who sat staring at him with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You okay?" he asked gently, kneeling beside her booth. She blinked, as if waking from a dream. "Who are you?" Nicholas shrugged. "Just a guy who works here." Her eyes searched his face, trying to understand what she'd just witnessed. That wasn't just reflex. That was training. "Who are you really?" He stood, offering her a hand. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly. "My name's Nicholas," he said simply. "And you should probably stay seated until the police get here." She didn't let go of his hand right away. "You saved my life." He looked down at their joined hands, then back at her. "I did what needed doing." Before she could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed through the diner windows. Within minutes, police flooded in, followed by paramedics. The 3 men were handcuffed and hauled away, still groggy and disoriented. A detective approached Autumn, notepad in hand. "Miss Freeman, can you tell me what happened here?" She glanced at Nicholas, who had quietly returned to wiping down a table as if nothing had occurred. "That man," she said, pointing at him. "He stopped them. All 3 of them, alone." The detective looked over at Nicholas, eyebrows raised. "Sir, can you come over here for a moment?" Nicholas set down his rag and walked over, hands in his pockets. "You took down 3 armed men by yourself?" The detective asked, skepticism clear in his tone. They weren't very good at their job, Nicholas replied evenly. What's your name? Nicholas Clark. The detective scribbled something down. You former military? Navy. Discharged 6 years ago. And you work here now? That's right. The detective studied him for a long moment. Well, Mr. Clark, you're either very brave or very lucky. Maybe both. Nicholas said nothing. As the police finished their interviews and the diner slowly emptied, Autumn Freeman remained seated, her eyes never leaving Nicholas. When the last officer finally left, she stood and walked over to him. I need to know your full name, she said. You already do. I need your contact information. Nicholas paused, drying a glass behind the counter. Why? Because I owe you my life. And because I need to understand who you are. He set the glass down. I'm nobody special. Just a single father trying to make ends meet. Her expression softened slightly. You have a daughter? Yeah, she's 9. Her name's Piper. Autumn pulled a business card from her purse and slid it across the counter. Autumn Freeman, CEO of Quantum Dynamics. If you ever need anything, call me. Nicholas glanced at the card, but didn't pick it up. I don't need anything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Now back to the story. She studied him again, this intense, searching look. Maybe not. But I think I need to talk to you again. Soon. He met her gaze. I work breakfast and lunch shifts. You know where to find me. She nodded slowly, then turned and walked toward the door. Before she left, she looked back one more time. Thank you, Nicholas. He nodded once. Stay safe, Miss Freeman. And then she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the business card on the counter. Nicholas picked it up, studied it for a moment, then tucked it into his apron pocket. Outside, the world continued spinning. Inside Rosie's diner, life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, but Nicholas knew, deep in his bones, that nothing would ever be quite the same again. 3 days passed before Autumn Freeman returned to Rosie's diner. 3 days during which Nicholas had been interviewed twice more by police, questioned by federal agents who seemed far too interested in his military background, and photographed by local news outlets who dubbed him the diner hero. He hated every second of it. All he wanted was to fade back into the comfortable anonymity of his breakfast shift, to pour coffee and flip pancakes and be home in time to help Piper with her homework. But the story had gone viral. Someone had captured shaky cell phone footage of the final moments of the confrontation. And now it was everywhere: social media, morning talk shows, internet forums debating whether he was a trained operative or just incredibly lucky. Nicholas kept his head down and ignored it all. He'd learned long ago that attention was dangerous, especially for someone with abilities he couldn't fully explain and didn't want to discuss. It was Thursday morning when she walked in again. This time, she wasn't alone. Autumn Freeman entered with 2 people in tow, a sharply dressed woman carrying a tablet and a man in an expensive suit who looked like he billed by the minute. They took the same booth she'd sat in 3 days earlier, and all 3 sets of eyes immediately found Nicholas. He approached with the coffee pot, his expression neutral. Morning. Coffee for everyone? Please, Autumn said. The other 2 nodded. Nicholas poured 3 cups, his movements efficient and practiced. You want menus, or are you just here to stare at me like I'm a zoo exhibit? The man in the suit bristled, but Autumn smiled faintly. Fair question. Actually, we're here because I have a proposition for you. Nicholas set the coffee pot down. I'm listening. Autumn gestured to the woman with the tablet. This is Grace Harris, my chief of staff. And this is Maxwell Hart, my attorney. What happened here 3 days ago wasn't random, Nicholas. Those men were sent by someone who wants to acquire my company by force. Someone who thinks intimidation and violence are acceptable business tactics. Nicholas crossed his arms. Sounds like you need better security. I have security, Autumn replied. 12 professionals. All highly trained. All supposedly the best in their field. And yet, 3 men walked past them, tracked me here, and nearly succeeded. Do you know why? Because your security team wasn't paying attention? Maxwell leaned forward. Because they didn't anticipate the threat. Because they treat protection like a checklist rather than an instinct. You, on the other hand, moved before the guns were even drawn. You sensed danger when everyone else was drinking coffee. Nicholas shifted his weight. I got lucky. No, Autumn said firmly. You didn't. I've watched that footage 100 times. You were already moving before the first man said a word. You knew. Silence hung between them. What do you want from me? Nicholas asked quietly. Autumn took a breath. I want to hire you. I have a job. I'll pay you 10 times what you make here. 20 times. Name your price. Nicholas shook his head. It's not about money. Grace spoke up for the first time. Then what is it about? He looked at her, then at Maxwell, then finally at Autumn. It's about my daughter. She needs stability. She needs me home at predictable hours. She needs a father who doesn't bring danger to the front door. Autumn's expression softened. I understand. But consider this, those men knew where I was. They tracked me to a random diner at 7 in the morning. Do you think they won't find out who you are? Do you think they won't come looking for the man who humiliated them? Nicholas's jaw tightened. She was right, and he knew it. Maxwell slid a folder across the table. We did some research on you, Mr. Clark. Navy veteran, honorably discharged. Worked in intelligence and threat assessment. No criminal record. Single father raising a 9-year-old daughter named Piper Stone. Currently residing at 847 Oakwood Terrace in a 2-bedroom apartment. Nicholas's eyes darkened. You investigated me. We had to, Autumn said. Because what I'm about to offer you requires trust. Complete trust. I'm not interested in being a bodyguard. I'm not asking you to be one, Autumn replied. I'm asking you to be my husband. The diner seemed to go silent. Though the usual sounds continued around them, the clink of silverware, the hiss of the griddle, the murmur of conversation. Nicholas stared at her. Excuse me? Autumn leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. I need to appear stable, grounded, protected. The board is circling like sharks. They think I'm vulnerable, especially after the kidnapping attempt. But if I have a husband, someone strong, capable, someone who demonstrably saved my life, they'll back off. The people trying to intimidate me will think twice. And I'll have time to consolidate power and root out whoever's behind this. Nicholas laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. You want a fake marriage? A contractual arrangement, Maxwell clarified. 1 year. Fully compensated. $2 million, tax-free, deposited into an account of your choosing. In exchange, you accompany Miss Freeman to public events, live in her residence, and maintain the appearance of a committed relationship. And my daughter? She comes with you, Autumn said immediately. In fact, she makes the story better. Devoted single father, tragic backstory, saves powerful CEO, they fall in love. It's perfect. Nicholas shook his head. It's insane. Grace pulled up something on her tablet. Your daughter has a rare autoimmune condition. Requires specialist care. Experimental treatments not covered by standard insurance. You're currently working 2 jobs here and weekend security at a warehouse just to cover her medical bills. $2 million would give her access to the best doctors in the world. Nicholas's hands clenched into fists. How dare you? I'm not trying to manipulate you, Autumn interrupted, her voice gentle now. I'm trying to show you that this benefits both of us. You need resources. I need protection and legitimacy. We can help each other." He stood silent for a long moment, staring at the three of them. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the kitchen. Autumn started to stand, but Grace put a hand on her arm. "Give him a minute." In the kitchen, Nicholas leaned against the steel counter, breathing slowly. His mind raced through scenarios, calculations, risks. Everything in him screamed to walk away, to protect Piper from this kind of chaos. But then he thought about the last doctor's appointment. The way the specialist had looked at him with pity and said, "There are treatments available, but they're experimental. Very expensive. Insurance won't cover them." He thought about the nights Piper couldn't sleep because her joints ached. The way she smiled through the pain, because she didn't want him to worry. He thought about the stack of medical bills on his kitchen table. Growing taller every month, Nicholas pushed through the kitchen door and returned to the booth. All three of them looked up. "If I do this," he said slowly, "I have conditions." Autumn nodded. "Name them." "First, my daughter's safety is non-negotiable. If at any point I feel she's in danger, the deal is off and we disappear. No questions, no legal action." "Agreed," Maxwell said, making a note. "Second, all of her medical care is covered. Not just what the $2 million can buy everything. For life, even after the contract ends." Autumn didn't hesitate. "Done. Third, this stays professional. No crossing lines, no pretending when cameras aren't around. We're business partners, nothing more." Something flickered in Autumn's eyes, but she nodded. "Understood." Nicholas took a breath. "And fourth, when this is over, you help me disappear again. New identities if necessary, relocation assistance, whatever it takes to make sure Piper and I can go back to being nobody." Autumn extended her hand across the table. "You have my word." Nicholas stared at her hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and shook it. "Then we have a deal," he said quietly. Maxwell immediately began pulling documents from his briefcase. "We'll need signatures, initial contracts, background authorizations." "Not here," Nicholas interrupted. "Tonight. After my shift. You bring the papers to my apartment, we go through everything, and if it all checks out, I'll sign." Autumn stood, and for the first time, he saw something like relief in her expression. "Thank you, Nicholas." He met her gaze. "Don't thank me yet. You have no idea what you're getting into." She smiled slightly. "Neither do you." As they left the diner, Nicholas stood alone in the aisle, watching them disappear into a black luxury sedan parked outside. Rosie, the owner, emerged from the back office. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and gray hair tied back in a bun. "You leaving us, Nick?" she asked gently. He turned to her. "Looks that way." She nodded slowly. "You're a good man. Whatever you're about to do, don't lose that." Nicholas managed a small smile. "I'll try." "I'll try." That night, after his shift ended and Piper was asleep in her room, Nicholas sat at his kitchen table with Maxwell and Grace, reading through page after page of legal documents. The contract was ironclad: 12 months. Public appearances, shared residence, medical coverage, financial compensation, termination clauses, confidentiality agreements. At the bottom of the final page was a line for his signature. Nicholas picked up the pen, hesitated for just a moment, then signed his name. Maxwell collected the documents and stood. "Welcome to the arrangement, Mr. Clark. Miss Freeman will send a car for you and your daughter this Saturday morning. Pack light, everything else will be provided." After they left, Nicholas sat in the darkness of his apartment, listening to the sound of Piper's breathing from the next room. He'd just agreed to marry a woman he didn't know, enter a world he didn't belong to, and gamble his daughter's safety on a promise. But as he looked at the copy of the contract sitting on the table, one line stood out: "All medical expenses for Piper Stone Clark, including experimental treatments, specialist consultations, and long-term care, covered in perpetuity. For that, he'd walk into fire, and something told him that before this was over, he might have to. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine. Nicholas stood in the small living room of his apartment, staring at two worn duffel bags that contained everything he and Piper owned worth keeping. Clothes, a few books, Piper's collection of hand-drawn pictures, and the photograph he kept in his wallet, the only picture he had of Piper's mother. Piper sat on the couch, swinging her legs, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. She wore a yellow sundress that was getting a bit too short and sneakers that had seen better days. Her brown hair hung in two braids down her back, and her eyes curious, intelligent. Far too observant for a 9-year-old, watched her father with quiet concern. "Daddy," she said softly, "are you scared?" Nicholas turned to her, surprised. "What makes you think that?" She shrugged. "You keep checking the window. And your hands are doing that thing where you open and close them really slow. You only do that when you're worried." He smiled despite himself, crossing the room to sit beside her. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that. That's what Miss Abigail says at school." She leaned against him. "But you didn't answer my question." Nicholas wrapped an arm around her small shoulders. "Yeah, sweetheart. I'm a little scared. Of the fancy lady? Miss Freeman. And no, not of her exactly. Just of what's about to change." Piper was quiet for a moment. Then, in that matter-of-fact way only young people possessed, she said, "Change isn't always bad. Sometimes it's just different." He kissed the top of her head. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't listen sometimes." A car horn sounded outside, not harsh, just a gentle alert. Nicholas stood and looked out the window. A sleek black SUV sat at the curb, looking absurdly out of place in their modest neighborhood. The driver, a professional-looking man in a dark suit, stood beside the open rear door. "That's our ride," Nicholas said. Piper hopped off the couch, elephant in hand. "Is it like a spaceship?" "More like a really expensive taxi. Will there be snacks?" Despite everything, Nicholas laughed. "I don't know. Let's find out." He grabbed both duffel bags and led Piper outside. The driver nodded respectfully as they approached. "Mr. Clark, Miss Stone, I'm James. I'll be your driver today. Please make yourselves comfortable." The interior of the SUV was immaculate leather seats, climate control, and yes, a small refrigerated compartment stocked with water bottles, juice boxes, and packets of crackers. Piper's eyes went wide. "Daddy, there are snacks. I see that." As James pulled away from the curb, Nicholas watched his apartment building disappear in the side mirror. It wasn't much, but it had been home, safe, predictable. Now they were heading into the unknown. The drive took 40 minutes. Leaving the modest neighborhoods behind and climbing into the hills where the houses grew larger and farther apart. Trees lined the winding roads, and iron gates appeared with increasing frequency. Finally, James turned onto a private drive marked only by a discreet bronze placard, Willow Crest Estate. The gate opened automatically, and they proceeded up a tree-lined driveway that seemed to go on forever. When the house finally came into view, Piper gasped. It wasn't a house. It was a mansion, 3 stories of elegant stone and glass, with tall windows that reflected the morning sun, perfectly manicured gardens, and a fountain in the circular drive that featured sculpted birds in flight. "Daddy," Piper whispered, "is that a castle?" "It's just a really big house," Nicholas replied, though even he was taken aback. James parked near the front entrance, where wide stone steps led up to massive double doors. As they opened the car doors, those front doors swung open, and Autumn Freeman appeared. She looked different than she had at the diner, more relaxed, though still polished. She wore dark jeans, a cream-colored blouse, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders. She smiled as she descended the steps. "Nicholas Piper, welcome to Willowcrest." Piper looked up at her father, then back at Autumn, then stepped forward with the directness only young people possessed. "You're really pretty. Are you going to be my new mom?" Nicholas felt his face flush. "Piper," but Autumn knelt down to Piper's eye level, her smile genuine. "That's very sweet of you to say. And no, I'm not going to be your mom. Nobody could replace her. But I hope we can be friends." Piper considered this carefully. "Friends is good. Can I see your house?" "Of course. Would you like a tour?" "Yes, please." Piper took Autumn's offered hand without hesitation, and together they walked toward the entrance. Nicholas followed, carrying both duffel bags. Feeling suddenly like an outsider in a world that moved too fast for him to catch up, the interior of Willowcrest was even more impressive than the exterior. The foyer featured a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum, polished marble floors, and a curved staircase that swept up to the second level. Original artwork hung on the walls, and fresh flowers adorned a table in the center of the space. A woman in her 50s appeared from a side hallway trim, efficient-looking, with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Ah, our guests have arrived. I'm Valerie Kim, the house manager. Welcome to Willowcrest." She approached Piper with a warm smile. "And you must be Miss Piper. I've prepared a room especially for you. Would you like to see it?" Piper looked at Nicholas, who nodded. "Go ahead, sweetheart. I'll be right behind you." As Valerie led Piper up the stairs, chatting about the house's library and game room, Autumn turned to Nicholas. "How are you holding up?" she asked quietly. He set down the duffel bags. "Honestly, I feel like I just stepped onto another planet." She smiled slightly. "I felt the same way the first time I came here. This was my grandfather's estate. He built it in the 70s. When he died, he left it to me, and I've never quite felt like I belong here either." Nicholas looked around the space. "It's impressive." "It's lonely," Autumn corrected. 12 bedrooms, most of them empty. Staff who are professional but distant. Dinner parties where everyone wants something. This place is beautiful, but it's never felt like home." There was something vulnerable in her voice that caught Nicholas off guard. For a moment, she wasn't the powerful CEO. She was just a person standing in a house too big for one. "Come on," she said, the moment passing. "Let me show you your quarters." She led him up the staircase and down a wide hallway lined with portraits of people Nicholas didn't recognize. At the end of the hall, she opened a door to reveal a spacious suite sitting area. King-sized bed, private bathroom with both a shower and a soaking tub, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. "This is the guest wing," Autumn explained. "You'll have complete privacy here. Piper's room is just next door. Valerie's showing it to her now. There's a connecting door between the rooms so she can reach you easily." Nicholas walked to the window, looking out at manicured lawns and hedges shaped into geometric patterns. "This is more space than our entire apartment. I want you both to be comfortable. If there's anything you need, different furniture, specific foods, whatever, just tell Valerie. She's magic at making things happen." He turned to face her. "Why are you being so nice to us?" Autumn seemed surprised by the question. "Because you saved my life. Because you're doing me an enormous favor. Because your daughter deserves kindness. Take your pick." Before he could respond, Piper's voice echoed down the hallway. Daddy, come see. My room has a window seat." Nicholas couldn't help but smile. "I should go check on her." "Of course. Take your time settling in. Dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. Casual attire." "And Nicholas?" She waited until he met her eyes. "Thank you for being here." He nodded once, then went to find his daughter. Piper's room was bright and airy, decorated in soft blues and whites. The promised window seat was piled with cushions, perfect for reading. There was a desk, a bookshelf already stocked with age-appropriate novels, and a bed that looked impossibly soft with a mountain of pillows. Piper was bouncing slightly on the mattress. "Daddy, this bed is like sleeping on a cloud. Can we keep it when we go home?" Nicholas sat beside her. "This is going to be home for a while, remember? We talked about this." Her bouncing slowed. "I know, but our real home. The apartment. Home. The apartment." He pulled her close. "Things are going to be different for a bit. But I'm still your dad, and you're still my #1 priority. Nothing about that changes, okay?" She nodded against his chest. "Okay, but Daddy, yeah? I think I like Ms. Autumn. She has kind eyes. Like the people who really mean it when they smile." Nicholas kissed her forehead. "That's good. I'm glad." That evening, they gathered in the dining room, a space that could have seated 20 but had been set for just 3. Autumn sat at the head of the table, with Nicholas and Piper on either side. The meal was prepared by a chef Nicholas hadn't even met yet. Herb-roasted salmon, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. For Piper, a separate plate with chicken fingers and fruit, which made her grin. "I told Valerie to make sure we had something you'd like," Autumn said to Piper. "Thank you. These are really good. Our cafeteria at school makes them all rubbery." Autumn laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "I'll pass your compliments to Chef Rodriguez." As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily than Nicholas had expected. Autumn asked Piper about school, her favorite subjects, what she liked to do for fun. Piper, never one to be shy, peppered Autumn with questions about the house, her job, whether she had any pets. "I used to have a dog," Autumn said. "A golden retriever named Biscuit. He passed away 2 years ago, and I haven't had the heart to get another." Piper's face fell. "I'm sorry. I bet he was a good dog. He was the best. Maybe someday I'll be ready again." After dinner, Valerie appeared to escort Piper upstairs for her bath and bedtime routine. Piper hugged Nicholas tightly. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, sweetheart. I'll be up to say good night in a bit." Once they were alone, Autumn refilled both their water glasses and sat back down. "She's wonderful," Autumn said quietly. "You've done an amazing job raising her." Nicholas stared into his glass. "I've done the best I could. Some days that feels like enough. Other days I'm terrified I'm failing her. You're not. Anyone can see how much she loves you, how secure she feels. That doesn't happen by accident." He looked up. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why don't you have anyone? Family, I mean. This huge house, all this success, but you're alone." Autumn was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather raised me after my parents died in a plane crash when I was 12. He was brilliant but cold. He taught me about business, about strategy, about never showing weakness. But he didn't teach me about connection. By the time he died, I'd spent so many years building walls that I forgot how to let anyone in." Nicholas nodded slowly. "Walls keep things out, but they also keep you trapped." She met his eyes. "Is that what happened to you? After Piper's mother died?" His jaw tightened. "I built different walls. Mine were about staying invisible, keeping my head down, making sure no one looked too closely at what I could do or who I really was. And now you're here, in the most visible place possible." "Yeah," he exhaled slowly. "Now I'm here." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people who'd built different fortresses suddenly finding themselves in the same strange territory. Finally, Autumn stood. "You should go say goodnight to Piper. Tomorrow we'll start planning our first public appearance. Nothing too dramatic. Just a charity luncheon. Give you both time to adjust." Nicholas rose as well. "Autumn?" She turned. "Thank you. For being kind to her. For making this less terrifying than it could have been." She smiled softly. Thank you for giving me a chance to remember what a home with people in it feels like. As Nicholas climbed the stairs to tuck Piper in, he realized that maybe, just maybe, this arrangement wouldn't be as purely transactional as he'd feared, and that thought, more than anything else, was what scared him most. The charity luncheon was held at the Grandstone Hotel, a historic building downtown with vaulted ceilings and crystal chandeliers that caught the afternoon light. Nicholas stood in front of the mirror in his suite, adjusting the tie that Valerie had somehow procured overnight. The charcoal suit fit perfectly, tailored to his frame in a way his old dress uniform never had. He barely recognized himself. Piper appeared in the doorway, wearing a navy dress with white trim and patent leather shoes. Her hair was styled in soft curls that Valerie had spent 20 minutes perfecting. "You look handsome, Daddy," she said with a grin. "And you look like a princess. Ready for this?" She nodded, though her hand found his and squeezed tight. "Will there be lots of people?" "Probably. But you'll sit with me and Ms. Autumn the whole time. If you get uncomfortable, just tell me and we'll take a break." Autumn met them in the foyer, wearing an elegant emerald dress that made her eyes seem even greener. She smiled when she saw them. "You both look wonderful." The car ride was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, photographers were already waiting outside. Autumn leaned close to Nicholas. "Just smile, hold my hand, and walk naturally. They'll get their shots and then leave us alone." As they stepped out of the car, flashes erupted. Nicholas kept his expression neutral, one hand holding Autumn's, the other resting protectively on Piper's shoulder. The questions came rapid fire, overlapping, nearly incomprehensible. "Miss Freeman, is it true you're engaged? How did you two meet? What's your response to the kidnapping attempt?" Autumn's smile never wavered. "We'll have a formal statement soon. For now, we're just here to support the Children's Medical Foundation." Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The ballroom was filled with circular tables, each set with fine china and fresh flowers. Business executives mingled with philanthropists, their conversations a blend of charity and networking. Autumn navigated the room with practiced ease, introducing Nicholas to board members, donors, and colleagues. "This is Nicholas Clark," she would say, her hand always finding his. "He's been my rock through everything." Nicholas shook hands, offered polite smiles, and said very little. He was acutely aware of how people looked at him with curiosity, skepticism, sometimes barely concealed judgment. He was the outsider, the mystery man who'd appeared out of nowhere. Piper stayed close to his side, her eyes wide as she took in the spectacle. When they finally sat down for lunch, she leaned over and whispered, "Daddy, why does everyone keep staring at us?" "Because they're curious," he whispered back. "But they'll get bored soon enough." Autumn overheard and smiled. "Piper, would you like to help me with something after lunch? There's a children's art exhibit in the next room. I thought maybe you could tell me which pieces you like best." Piper's face brightened. "Really? I love art. I thought you might. Your dad told me you're quite the artist yourself." Nicholas caught Autumn's eye and nodded slightly in thanks. She'd remembered their conversation from the previous night, remembered that Piper loved to draw. After the speeches and presentations concluded, Autumn kept her promise. She took Piper's hand and led her to the adjacent gallery, where young artists had contributed paintings and sculptures. Nicholas followed at a distance, watching as Autumn knelt beside Piper, genuinely listening as the girl explained why she liked certain colors or compositions. "You're good with her," a voice said beside him. Nicholas turned to find an older woman watching him with shrewd eyes. She wore pearls and carried herself with the authority of old money. "Thank you," he said carefully. "I'm Cora Lawrence. I've known Autumn since she was a teenager. Her grandfather and I served on several boards together." Nicholas extended his hand. "Nicholas Clark." She shook it firmly. "I know who you are. The whole city knows by now. What I don't know is whether you're genuine or just another opportunist." He met her gaze steadily. "I guess you'll have to decide that for yourself." Cora studied him for a long moment. "Fair answer. But let me give you some advice. Autumn has spent her entire life surrounded by people who want something from her. If you're different, prove it. And if you're not, don't waste your time." Before he could respond, she walked away, leaving him alone with her words. That evening, back at Willowcrest, Piper was exhausted, but happy. She chattered through dinner about the paintings she'd seen, the fancy desserts, the way the chandeliers sparkled like stars. Nicholas listened, grateful that despite everything, she seemed to be adjusting. After Valerie took Piper upstairs, Autumn poured 2 glasses of wine and gestured toward the terrace. "Walk with me?" They stepped outside into the warm evening air. The gardens were lit by subtle landscape lighting, creating pools of soft illumination among the shadows. "You handled today well," Autumn said. "I know it wasn't easy." Nicholas sipped his wine. "I felt like a fraud." "Why?" "Because I don't belong in that world." Everyone could see it. Autumn stopped walking and turned to face him. "You belonged because I wanted you there. Because Piper was there. Because you saved my life and I trust you. That's more belonging than half the people in that room will ever have." He was quiet, absorbing her words. "Besides," she continued, her tone lighter, "Cora Lawrence cornered me after you two spoke. She said, and I quote, 'He's either the real deal or the best actor I've ever seen. Either way, don't let him go.'" Nicholas laughed softly. "She told me to prove I'm not an opportunist. She's protective. She watched my grandfather slowly crush any softness out of me. I think she's hoping you might help bring some of it back. They continued walking in comfortable silence. When they reached a stone bench beneath an old oak tree, Autumn sat down, and Nicholas joined her. "Can I ask you something personal?" She said, "Go ahead. What happened to Piper's mother?" "You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Nicholas stared out at the darkened garden. "Her name was Jessica. We met after I got out of the Navy. She was a nurse at the VA hospital. She was kind, patient, everything I needed at the time. We got married fast, had Piper right away. For 3 years, everything was perfect." He paused, his voice dropping. "Then she got sick. Aggressive cancer. By the time they caught it, there was nothing they could do. She died when Piper was 6. Piper remembers her, but not as clearly as I wish she did." Autumn reached over and placed her hand on his. "I'm sorry." He looked down at their joined hands. "That's when I learned to be invisible. I couldn't afford grief, couldn't afford to fall apart. Piper needed me. So I worked, kept my head down, and tried to give her as normal a life as possible. You've done more than that. You've given her love." He squeezed her hand gently. "What about you? You said your parents died when you were 12. That must have been devastating." Autumn nodded. "It was. One day I had a family. The next I was living in this massive house with a grandfather who saw me as a project, not a person. He meant well, I think, but he didn't know how to handle emotions. So he taught me to ignore them instead. Is that why you're so controlled all the time?" She smiled sadly. "Survival mechanism. If you don't feel, you can't be hurt." Nicholas turned to face her fully. "But you can't really live either." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something neither was quite ready to name. Then Autumn stood, breaking the moment. "It's getting late. We should go in." As they walked back toward the house, Nicholas realized that the walls they'd both built were starting to show cracks. And he wasn't sure if that was dangerous or exactly what they both needed. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Nicholas had settled into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings were spent with Piper before a private tutor arrived. Afternoons often included appearances with Autumn at various functions, and evenings were becoming something he looked forward to. Quiet dinners, conversations on the terrace, moments that felt increasingly less like performance. and more like genuine connection. But tonight was different. Nicholas woke at 2 in the morning, to the familiar sensation that had saved his life more than once. That subtle electrical pulse, the awareness of distress somewhere nearby. He rose quietly and followed the feeling through the darkened halls of Willowcrest, his bare feet silent on the marble floors. The sensation led him to the west wing, a section of the house he'd never explored. The door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the corridor. Nicholas approached carefully and peered inside. The room was clearly a private study. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a large desk dominated the center. But what caught his attention was the wall of photographs, documents, and newspaper clippings, all connected by red string like something from a detective's investigation board. And there, sitting in a leather chair with a laptop open, was a woman he'd never seen before. She was elderly, perhaps in her 80s, with silver hair and elegant features that reminded him distinctly of Autumn. She wore a silk robe and reading glasses, and she was staring directly at him. "You must be Nicholas," she said calmly, as if finding a stranger in her study at 2 in the morning was perfectly normal. He stepped inside. "I am, and you are?" "Evelyn Thomas, Autumn's grandmother. Though she thinks I'm too senile to leave my rooms, so we haven't been formally introduced." Nicholas moved closer, his eyes drawn to the investigation board. At the center was a photograph of a young man in a naval uniform. The face was hauntingly familiar. "That's you," Evelyn said, following his gaze. "Or rather, your father. Lieutenant James Clark, decorated intelligence officer, died in a training accident in 1989, except it wasn't an accident." Nicholas felt the floor shift beneath him. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down. This is going to take a moment." He sat, his mind racing. She pulled out a file folder, thick with documents. 35 years ago, my husband Thomas Freeman was CEO of Quantum Dynamics. Your father worked in naval intelligence, but was also consulting for us on classified defense projects. He discovered something, evidence that someone inside the company was selling secrets to foreign entities. Nicholas's hands gripped the armrests. "Who?" "My son. Autumn's father. Richard Freeman." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Richard found out that your father was about to expose him," Evelyn continued, her voice steady but pained. "So he arranged the accident, made it look like pilot error. Your father died, his findings were buried, and Richard inherited the company when Thomas passed away a year later." Nicholas stood abruptly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Richard died 5 years ago, but the corruption didn't end with him. Someone else has taken up his operation, someone currently trying to force Autumn out. And I believe they're connected to your father's death." He paced the room. "Does Autumn know any of this? About Richard's crimes?" "No. I've kept it from her to protect her. She idolized her father despite his coldness. Finding out he was a traitor and a murderer would destroy her. So why tell me?" Evelyn stood, moving to the investigation board. "Because 3 weeks ago, armed men tried to kidnap my granddaughter. Because you appeared out of nowhere with skills that suggest intelligence training. Because when I ran a background check on you, I found gaps, inconsistencies, and one DNA match in a classified military database to Lieutenant James Clark." Nicholas's jaw clenched. "You had my DNA tested?" "Coffee cup from your first breakfast here. I had to know who you really were." He turned away, trying to process everything. "I don't remember my father. I was told he died before I was born. My mother raised me alone until she died when I was 8. After that, it was foster care and eventually the Navy. Your mother must have hidden you, changed your records to protect you." "Smart woman." Evelyn returned to her chair. "But now you're here, living under this roof, connected to Autumn through an arrangement neither of you fully understands. Don't you find that suspicious?" Nicholas faced her. Are you saying someone orchestrated this? The kidnapping, all of it? I'm saying there are no coincidences in this world, young man. Someone wanted you, and Autumn brought together. The question is why? Before he could respond, a voice came from the doorway. Grandmother? They both turned. Autumn stood in the entrance, wrapped in a silk robe, her expression confused and wary. What's going on? She asked. Evelyn and Nicholas exchanged glances. Then the old woman sighed. Come in, dear. Close the door. It's time you learned some truths about your family. The revelation about Richard Freeman's crimes had cast a shadow over Willowcrest. For 2 days after Evelyn's disclosure, Autumn had been distant, processing the information that her father had been a traitor and potentially a murderer. Nicholas gave her space, focusing on Piper and trying to understand his own connection to the conspiracy, but the threat Evelyn had warned about was about to materialize. It was Thursday afternoon when Maxwell Hart arrived. At the estate unannounced, his expression grim. Nicholas found him in Autumn's office, both of them hunched over a laptop. What's wrong? Nicholas asked from the doorway. Autumn looked up, her face pale. We've been hacked. Someone accessed our secure servers and downloaded confidential files, including details about our defense contracts. Maxwell turned the laptop toward him. But that's not the worst part. They also accessed your contract with Miss Freeman, the marriage arrangement, everything. Nicholas felt his blood run cold. When? 2 hours ago. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for. Autumn stood and began pacing. If that information gets out, we're finished. The board will use it as proof that I'm unstable, manipulative. They'll force me out. Who has the technical capability to breach your security? Nicholas asked. Maxwell pulled up another screen. We're tracing the intrusion now, but preliminary analysis suggests it came from inside the company. Someone with admin access. A name immediately came to Nicholas's mind, the same name that had appeared repeatedly in Evelyn's investigation. Cameron Steele. Autumn stopped pacing. My father's old business partner. He retired from the board 5 years ago, did he? Nicholas moved closer to the laptop. Or did he just step into the shadows? Maxwell's fingers flew across the keyboard. Steele still owns 18% of company shares through various trusts and subsidiaries. He also maintains a consulting contract that gives him network access for legacy projects. Autumn's eyes widened. He's been there the whole time. Before anyone could respond, Autumn's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression hardened. It's him. He wants to meet. Tonight. Says it's urgent. Nicholas stepped forward. Don't go. It's obviously a trap. If I don't go, he'll release the files. He's making that very clear. Then I'm coming with you. Autumn shook her head. That's what he wants. To get us both in the same place, vulnerable. No, I need you here protecting Piper. If something happens to me, she need you. If something happens to me, she need you. The weight of her words settled over them. Nicholas wanted to argue, to insist that his place was beside her, but she was right. Piper's safety came first. Where's the meeting? He asked quietly. The old quantum facility on Industrial Drive, the one we decommissioned last year. That's isolated. No witnesses. Nicholas pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Maxwell put a hand on his arm. And tell them what? That we suspect someone might threaten Miss Freeman based on a hunch? They won't act without evidence. Autumn grabbed her coat. I have to go. Cameron's smart, careful. If there's any chance of resolving this quietly, I have to take it. Nicholas caught her arm gently. Then at least wear this. He pulled a small device from his pocket, something he'd kept from his Navy days. Tracking beacon. Military grade. I'll know exactly where you are at all times. She took it, their fingers touching briefly. Thank you. Autumn, he said, his voice low and urgent. "Be careful. Something about this feels wrong." She met his eyes, and for a moment, the professional facade dropped. "If I don't come back, make sure Piper knows she's loved. And tell her about my grandmother's cookies. The recipe's in the kitchen. She loved them." Then she was gone, leaving Nicholas standing in the office with a knot of dread in his chest. An hour later, Nicholas sat in the security room with Maxwell, watching the tracking beacon signal move across a digital map. Piper was safely upstairs with Valerie, unaware of the danger. "She's arrived at the facility," Maxwell said, pointing to the screen where the beacon had stopped moving. Nicholas leaned forward, every instinct screaming at him to go after her. "How long has she been stationary?" 4 minutes. "Wait, something's wrong." The signal began moving again, but not toward the exit. It was heading deeper into the facility, toward the old manufacturing wing that had been condemned. "She's being moved," Nicholas said, already standing. "Call the police. Tell them there's an emergency at the Industrial Drive facility." "What are you going to do?" Nicholas was already heading for the door. "What I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to protect her." He took Maxwell's car, pushing the speed limit as he raced across the city. The tracking beacon showed Autumn's position had stopped in the deepest part of the facility. Nicholas's mind ran through scenarios, tactics, approaches. He'd spent years in intelligence, learning to anticipate threats, but this was personal in a way nothing had ever been before. When he arrived at the facility, the front gates were chained. Nicholas didn't hesitate. He scaled the fence, dropping silently on the other side. The building loomed before him, dark and abandoned. He moved through the shadows, following the beacon signal on his phone. Inside, the facility was a maze of empty corridors and gutted rooms. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. His footsteps echoed despite his attempts at stealth. Finally, he reached a large room that had once been the main assembly floor. In the center, illuminated by a single overhead light, sat Autumn. She was tied to a chair, her mouth gagged, her eyes wide with fear, and standing behind her, holding a gun casually at his side, was a man Nicholas had only seen in photographs. Cameron Steele. Silver-haired, well-dressed, with the cold eyes of someone who'd made peace with violence long ago. "Ah, Nicholas Clark," Cameron said pleasantly. "Right on time. I was wondering how long it would take you to disregard Miss Freeman's wishes and come rushing to her rescue." Nicholas stepped into the light, hands visible, posture non-threatening. "Let her go. Whatever this is about, it's between us." Cameron smiled. "Oh, but that's where you're wrong. This is about legacy. About finishing what Richard Freeman started 35 years ago. About eliminating the last loose ends. You killed my father. Richard killed your father. I merely helped arrange the logistics. But yes, Lieutenant Clark was quite the problem. Just like you're becoming now." Nicholas took a careful step forward. "So what's your plan? Kill us both? That won't stop the truth from coming out." "The truth?" Cameron laughed. "The truth is whatever people believe. And they'll believe that tragic tale of the fake marriage, the conspiracy, the murder-suicide when two people in over their heads made a terrible decision." He raised the gun, pointing it at Autumn's head. "But first, I want you to watch her die. Just like your father watched his career die before we eliminated him." Nicholas's mind raced. He was too far away to close the distance before Cameron fired. But he felt that familiar pulse, that bioelectric awareness connecting him to everything in the room. Cameron's elevated heart rate. Autumn's terror. Even the building's old electrical systems, humming in the walls. And then Nicholas did something he'd sworn he'd never do again. He reached out with that ability, that gift he'd never fully understood, and sent a targeted pulse toward the overhead lights. They exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the room into darkness. The darkness lasted only seconds, but it was enough. Nicholas moved on pure instinct, closing the distance between himself and Cameron with the speed of someone who'd trained for exactly these moments. He heard the gun discharge, felt the bullet pass inches from his shoulder, and then his hands were on Cameron. Twisting the weapon away, they grappled in the darkness, crashing into old equipment. Cameron was strong for his age, desperate, but Nicholas had youth and training on his side. Within moments, he had Cameron pinned face down on the concrete floor, the gun kicked far out of reach. "It's over," Nicholas said, breathing hard. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Red and blue lights began filtering through the grimy windows. Nicholas left Cameron on the floor and rushed to Autumn, quickly untying her restraints and removing the gag. She gasped for air, her whole body shaking. "How did you do that?" "The lights?" "Later," he said gently, helping her stand. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then suddenly wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. Nicholas felt her trembling against him and pulled her closer, one hand cradling the back of her head. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe." Police flooded the building moments later, taking Cameron into custody. Paramedics checked both Nicholas and Autumn, finding only minor bruises. Detective Chun, who'd been investigating the original kidnapping attempt, arrived and immediately began questioning them. "Mr. Clark, Miss Freeman, can you explain what happened here tonight?" Autumn, still shaky but composed, provided a clear account: the meeting request, the trap, Nicholas's rescue. But she left out one detail: the exploding lights. Later, at the police station while giving formal statements, Detective Chun pulled Nicholas aside. "There's something you're not telling me," the detective said. "Cameron Steele is claiming you have some kind of ability, that you caused an electrical surge. Obviously that's ridiculous, but I need to know, is there anything about tonight that you're withholding?" Nicholas met his gaze steadily. "I did what I had to do to save her life. That's all that matters." The detective studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. You're free to go." Back at Willowcrest, it was nearly 3 in the morning. Piper had been told there was a security situation, but that everyone was safe. She'd finally fallen asleep in Nicholas's bed, clutching her stuffed elephant. Nicholas found Autumn in the study, staring at the investigation board Evelyn had created. She turned when he entered. "We need to talk about what happened tonight," she said quietly. He closed the door behind him. "I know. The lights didn't just malfunction. You did something." She stepped closer. "I've been around you long enough now to notice things. The way you sense danger before it appears. How you knew exactly where Cameron would be standing. And tonight, the way the electrical system responded right when you needed it to." Nicholas was silent, weighing how much to reveal. Autumn's voice softened. "I'm not afraid of you, Nicholas. I'm grateful. But I need to understand who you really are." He moved to the window, looking out at the dark gardens. "I don't fully understand it myself. I've always been able to sense bioelectric fields, the energy that living things give off. Sometimes when I'm under extreme stress, I can manipulate electrical systems. It's not reliable, not something I can control completely. That's why I never wanted to use it. But you used it tonight. For me," he turned to face her. "I wasn't going to let him hurt you." She crossed the room until she stood directly in front of him. "Thank you for trusting me with this, for saving my life again." Their eyes met, and the air between them felt charged with something neither could name. Autumn reached up slowly, her hand touching his cheek. "This stopped being fake a while ago, didn't it?" she whispered. Nicholas covered her hand with his own. "Yeah, it did." The following week brought unexpected peace. Cameron Steele was in custody, facing multiple charges including kidnapping, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The evidence Evelyn had compiled over the years, combined with testimony from Nicholas and Autumn, painted a damning picture of decades-long corruption. But peace, Nicholas had learned, was often just the quiet before a different kind of storm. It was Piper who noticed something was wrong first. She'd been feeling tired more often, her joints aching in ways that worried Nicholas. He'd scheduled an emergency appointment with her specialist at Metro General Hospital. The doctor's face told Nicholas everything before the words came. The disease is progressing faster than we anticipated. Her immune system is attacking itself more aggressively. We need to move forward with the experimental treatment immediately. How immediately? Nicholas asked, his hand finding Piper's. This week. The procedure is intensive, requires a 3-day hospital stay, and there's no guarantee it will work. But without it, we're looking at months, not years. Piper squeezed his hand. Daddy, I'm scared. He knelt beside her chair, eye level with his daughter. I know, sweetheart. But we're going to fight this together. You, me, and Ms. Autumn. We're a team now. When they returned to Willowcrest, Autumn was waiting in the foyer. She took one look at Nicholas's face and knew. Tell me, she said simply. They sat in the study while Piper rested upstairs. Nicholas explained the doctor's assessment, the treatment plan, the risks. Autumn listened intently, her hand finding his partway through. Whatever you need, she said when he finished. Money, resources, specialists from anywhere in the world. Consider it done. The money you've already provided covers everything, Nicholas replied. But I need something else. Anything. I need you there. At the hospital, Piper asked for you specifically. She said you make her feel brave. Autumn's eyes glistened. Of course. I wouldn't be anywhere else. The night before Piper's treatment, they gathered in her room at Willowcrest. Evelyn had come. Out of her wing for the first time in months. Bringing homemade cookies she'd somehow convinced the kitchen staff to let her bake. Valerie sat in the corner, trying not to cry. Even Maxwell had stopped by, bringing Piper a first-edition children's book he claimed wasn't that valuable, but clearly was. Piper sat in the middle of her bed, surrounded by people who'd become family in just weeks. I want everyone to know, Piper said with the seriousness only young people could muster, that even if the treatment doesn't work, I'm happy, because Daddy isn't alone anymore. And neither is Ms. Autumn. You found each other because of me, and that makes everything worth it. Nicholas felt his throat tighten. Autumn reached over and took his hand. You listen to me, Piper Stone, Evelyn said firmly. You're going to be fine. Freeman women don't give up, and you're one of us now. Piper smiled. Am I really? Absolutely, Autumn said, her voice thick with emotion. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choosing each other, and we choose you. The hospital room 3 days later was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors. Piper lay small and pale in the bed, IVs running into both arms, her breathing assisted by oxygen. The treatment had been brutal chemicals designed to reset her immune system, essentially tearing it down to rebuild it stronger. Nicholas sat on one side of her bed, Autumn on the other. Neither had left except for brief bathroom breaks. They'd talked through the nights, sharing stories about their childhoods, their fears, their hopes. They'd held hands when Piper's vitals dipped dangerously low. They'd prayed together despite neither being particularly religious. On the third morning, Piper's eyes fluttered open. She looked at Nicholas, then at Autumn, and smiled weakly. Did it work? She whispered. The doctor who entered moments later checked her charts, ran some quick tests, and then turned to them with cautious optimism. Early indicators are positive. Her body is responding well. We'll need weeks of monitoring, but I'm encouraged. Nicholas dropped his head into his hands, overwhelmed with relief. Autumn wrapped her arms around him from the side, her own tears falling freely. She's going to be okay, Autumn whispered. Our girl is going to be okay. And in that moment, Nicholas realized she'd said, our girl, not your daughter. The lines between performance and reality had vanished completely. 2 months after Piper's successful treatment, Quantum Dynamics held an emergency shareholder meeting. The boardroom was packed investors, board members, legal teams, and media. Representatives all waiting to hear the findings of the internal investigation. Autumn stood at the head of the table, Nicholas beside her in a show of united strength. Evelyn sat in a wheelchair near the window, her presence alone sending a message that the Freeman matriarch was far from senile. Maxwell stood and addressed the room. After extensive investigation, we've uncovered a conspiracy spanning 35 years. Cameron Steele, working initially with Richard Freeman, systematically embezzled funds, sold company secrets, and eliminated threats to their operation. Lieutenant James Clark, Nicholas's father, was murdered for discovering their crimes. Gasps echoed through the room. Maxwell continued, presenting evidence piece by piece: financial records, communications, testimony from accomplices who'd agreed to cooperate. Furthermore, Maxwell said, the recent kidnapping attempt and subsequent threats against Miss Freeman were orchestrated by Mr. Steele in an attempt to force her removal and install leadership sympathetic to his interests. One board member stood. This is devastating. How do we move forward? Autumn stepped forward, with transparency, with accountability, and with leadership committed to rebuilding trust. I'm proposing a complete restructuring of our board, independent audits, and the establishment of an ethics committee with real authority. Another board member spoke up. And what about your arrangement with Mr. Clark? The reports that your marriage was contractual. Autumn didn't hesitate. She reached for Nicholas's hand. What began as a business arrangement became something real. Nicholas saved my life twice and helped expose corruption that threatened everything my grandfather built. But more importantly, he reminded me what integrity looks like, what family means, what love is. She turned to face Nicholas fully. Which is why I'm asking you, in front of all these witnesses, to make this marriage real. No contract, no timeline, just us. Will you marry me, Nicholas Clark? The room went silent. Nicholas felt every eye on him, but all he saw was Autumn, brilliant, strong, vulnerable Autumn, who'd somehow become his everything. Yes, he said simply. 1,000 times yes. The room erupted in applause, some genuine, some obligatory, but it didn't matter. The vote that followed was unanimous. Autumn would remain CEO, with expanded authority to implement her reforms. As they left the building, reporters swarmed. Nicholas and Autumn faced them together, hands clasped. Miss Freeman, what's your message to those who doubted you? Autumn smiled. That sometimes the most unexpected paths lead us exactly where we need to be. That love and integrity will always triumph over corruption. And that family comes in many forms. Mr. Clark, how does it feel to go from diner server to corporate husband? Nicholas looked at the cameras steadily. I'm still the same person I was serving breakfast. I just have more resources now to help people. And I have a family that makes every day worth living. That evening, Willowcrest hosted a small celebration. Piper, healthy and glowing, danced in the garden with Evelyn watching fondly from the terrace. Valerie had outdone herself with decorations. Even Maxwell had loosened his tie and was actually smiling. Nicholas found Autumn standing alone near the fountain, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Penny for your thoughts? He said, slipping his arm around her waist. She leaned into him. I'm thinking about how 3 months ago, I was alone in this house, convinced I'd always be alone. And now look at us. No regrets? She turned to face him, her hands resting on his chest. Not a single one, you? He kissed her forehead. Only that I didn't meet you sooner. From the garden, Piper's laughter rang out clear and bright. They both turned to watch her, this little girl who'd brought them together, who'd survived against all odds. She's going to need a proper family, Autumn said softly. Maybe siblings eventually. A real home, not just a house. Nicholas pulled her closer. Are you saying what I think you're saying? She smiled up at him. I'm saying this is just the beginning, Nicholas Clark, for all of us. As the evening deepened into night, surrounded by the people who'd become their unlikely family, Nicholas finally understood what Piper had tried to tell him months ago. Change wasn't always bad. Sometimes it was exactly what you needed, arriving in the most unexpected way, from the most unlikely source. And sometimes, saving someone's life meant they ended up saving yours right back. 5 years later, the morning sun filtered through the windows of a modest building on Harrison Street, illuminating hand-painted letters on the glass door. The Clark Foundation, Free Services, Real Hope. Nicholas stood behind the counter, tools spread before him as he repaired an elderly woman's radio. His hair was touched with more gray now, and laugh lines had deepened around his eyes. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled to his elbows. "There you go, Mrs. Chen," he said, handing back the radio. "Good as new." "You're a miracle worker," she said, pressing a container of homemade dumplings into his hands despite his protests. "For your family." After she left, Nicholas looked around the space he and Autumn had created together. One side housed his repair shop, where he fixed everything from toasters to laptops, never turning anyone away regardless of their ability to pay. The other side was a community center where Autumn held financial literacy workshops for struggling families, teaching them the skills her grandfather had taught her, but with warmth he'd never possessed. The walls displayed children's artwork, including several pieces by Piper, now 14 and thriving. Her autoimmune disease was in full remission, and she'd discovered a talent for painting that had earned her a spot in a prestigious arts program. The door chimed, and Autumn entered carrying 2 coffee cups and their 3-year-old son, James, named after Nicholas's father. The boy had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. "Dada!" James squealed, reaching for Nicholas. He took his son, kissing Autumn's cheek. "How was the meeting?" "Productive." The board approved funding for 10 more community centers across the state. She smiled. Evelyn would be proud. Nicholas's grandmother-in-law had passed peacefully 2 years earlier, but not before seeing Piper fully recovered and holding baby James in her arms. She'd left them Willowcrest in her will, which they'd promptly converted into a rehabilitation center for veterans struggling with PTSD and addiction. "Speaking of Piper," Autumn continued, she called. Her art piece was selected for the youth exhibition at the Metropolitan Gallery. Nicholas beamed. "That's my girl." "Our girl," Autumn corrected with a smile. The same correction she'd been making for 5 years. That evening, they gathered for dinner not at a mansion, but in the comfortable 3-bedroom home they'd bought in a mixed-income neighborhood. Piper helped set the table while James played with blocks on the floor. The meal was simple, lasagna that Nicholas had made from his late wife Jessica's recipe, a tradition Autumn had encouraged him to maintain. "I got an email today," Piper announced as they ate, "from a girl whose mom saw a news story about our foundation. She said watching Dad fix things for free inspired her mom to start volunteering at a food bank. Isn't that amazing?" Nicholas reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "That's what this is all about. One person helping another, creating ripples." After dinner, while Autumn put James to bed, Nicholas and Piper sat on the back porch. The houses here were close together, the yard small, but there was a warmth to this neighborhood that Willowcrest had never possessed. "Dad," Piper said quietly, "do you ever miss the big house? The fancy life?" He considered the question carefully. "I miss your great-grandmother Evelyn." "But the house? The money?" "No, this right here. This is everything I never knew I needed." "Because of Autumn?" "Because of all of you. Because we built something real, something that matters." Piper leaned against his shoulder. "Mom would have liked her, I think." "Autumn, I mean." Nicholas's throat tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think she would have. I think she'd be happy knowing you have so many people loving you." Inside, Autumn appeared at the door. "Nicholas, there's someone here to see you." A young man stood in the living room, nervous, clutching a worn backpack. "Mr. Clark? I'm sorry to come by so late." "I'm Marcus. I work at the warehouse where you used to do security. I heard you help people, and I didn't know where else to go. Nicholas gestured to the couch. Sit down. Tell me what you need. As Marcus explained his situation, a broken-down car threatening his ability to get to his 2 jobs and support his daughter, Nicholas listened with full attention. When the young man finished, Nicholas simply nodded. Bring the car by the foundation tomorrow morning. I'll take a look, see what we can do. And if it's beyond repair, we'll figure something out. Nobody should lose their livelihood over transportation. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I can't pay you. Then pay it forward someday when you're able. Help someone else who needs it. After Marcus left, Autumn wrapped her arms around Nicholas from behind. You know we just committed to probably buying that man a car, right? Probably, Nicholas agreed, turning to face her. Problem? She kissed him softly. Not even a little bit. This is who you are. It's who we are together. I wouldn't change it for anything. Later, with the house quiet and everyone asleep, Nicholas stood in the doorway of James's room, watching his son sleep. Down the hall, Piper's light was still on as she worked on her art, and beside him, Autumn leaned against the doorframe, content. They'd traveled an impossible journey from a diner booth to a boardroom. From a fake marriage to a real family. From running from attention to using their platform for good. The boy who'd grown up invisible had become a man people sought out. The woman who'd built walls had learned to build bridges instead. What are you thinking? Autumn whispered. Nicholas smiled. That 5 years ago, I saved your life in a diner. But the truth is, you saved mine right back. You gave me permission to be seen, to use what I could do for good, to build something that matters. She took his hand. We built it together. And we're not done yet. Outside, the neighborhood settled into peaceful night. Inside, a family forged not by blood alone but by choice. By sacrifice, by love. Prepared for whatever tomorrow would bring. Nicholas Clark had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do wasn't stopping kidnappers or exposing corruption. It was showing up, day after day. Fixing what was broken, helping those who needed it. And choosing love over fear. And in a modest house on an ordinary street. Surrounded by the people who'd become his whole world. That was exactly what he intended to keep doing. One repair at a time. One person at a time. One act of kindness at a time. Because that's what real heroes did. Not for glory or recognition, but simply because it was right. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.